Good evening, fellow Unselects. Whether you're a seasoned public official, a curious student, or a concerned neighbor, this is the show for you. We are not the elite. We are not the chosen. We are not the elected. We are the Unselects, the ones who ask questions, the ones who challenge the norms, and the ones who refuse to be mere spectators. We're not here to judge. We're here to understand, to ask questions, and possibly have a little fun along the way. I'm Gregg Richards.
And I'm Brian Costello, and we are the Unselects.
So Brian, I think we have to talk about the election that we just had here in town last week. People may want to know, who in the heck are these people? Why did they run? I heard there was this writing campaign. What happened? So, I think you and I have been talking about the MBTA communities for a while. We had a little group, called Enough, where we got together and we've been attending a lot of the meetings. So I think we should just talk a little bit about, let people know what we're all about and why we're here.
Sure. When I think about it, what got me most motivated in this campaign on the 3A Communities Act was looking at our town and saying, wow, we seem to have a lot of building in this town and it's nonstop. And when we looked at the zone that was coming out, we said, this zone is very compact. It seems to be suggesting that we need to put 1,500 more housing units in town. And that was an issue that seemed to resonate with a lot of people. Just asking the question, why is the state forcing this on a town like Shrewsbury and other towns?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when we went to a lot of the planning board meetings or finance committee meetings, one of the things I understood was people would get up and make comments. And a lot of times people would say, I didn't even know this was happening in town. And it wasn't even specific to the MBTA zone. There was other planning projects, such as the warehouse project up on Clinton Street and Holden Street. And I really started to understand that when people ask questions of our current committees and boards, they really don't provide great answers back to the citizens, right? So a lot of people go up and say, hey, I'm concerned about this. How is this going to impact me? And it kind of seems like it falls on deaf ears. You don't really get a great response, when you attend to these meetings. I don't know what your experience has been, but that's how I kind of felt.
Yeah, the response you tend to get is a little bit, let me worry about that. I'll take care of you. But the reality is, I think what you're seeing is the town consistently comes back and says, well, we put this on our site and we talked about it.
Right.
And it's on our site. And they forget that the average person has a job, often has kids, has a busy life. That's not an excuse not to be involved in your town. But what we recognized was the only way we could get people involved was for average citizens to start talking to each other, because we can't rely on the bureaucrats and the paid officials and the elected officials to tell us the reality of what something is.
Right. And a lot of times, right, they're only giving you one side of the story, or they're giving you this side. I shouldn't say one side. They're giving you a very measured response, right? That it comes from, here's the documents, or here's the plan that we're supposed to lay out. It's something we have to do. It's a mandate, right? So we're just going to go down a path. And there's a lot of gaps in between that I think we were trying to fill in. And that's, I think, why you and I got involved initially when we did the presentation at the library. It was like, wait a minute. We started to look into it and we said, hey, there's a whole bunch of other things I think people should know so they can make a more informed decision, right? So we were just trying to give a more comprehensive view of what was going on in this specific article. And then I think as we talked to people, they would come up to us and say, hey, it's not just MBTA communities. I'm concerned about our schools, right? We have overcrowding in the schools. The select board has already put in a notice of intent to expand the high school, right? Which is an 80,000 square foot expansion at, the initial sum of, I believe it's $140 million, of which the state really is only able to fund half. So we could potentially have a $70 million, right, expense that we have to take to deal with the high school. And that's at our current population, not looking at any of these additional projects that are getting built throughout town. And there's also people who are just concerned not only with the high school overcrowding, but other school crowding, school sizes when it comes to the classroom sizing, maybe some curriculum issues. And a lot of people have complained to me or have talked to me about, hey, if there's an issue at school, I don't really get a great resolution. So I don't know what you've kind of heard me talk to people about the schools, but
Yeah, a good example I thought on schools is I heard the town manager mention that they built the new Beal on a 50-year plan. And then they mentioned that it was a number of hundreds of students that it could. Well, if you look at the goal and the size of the buildings that we have coming into town, and then you add that up to the MBTA Communities Act, which says that they're favoring large unit sizes, family friendly. The law actually says family friendly units. That's actually going to get blown away in a lot quicker than 50 years.
Oh, totally.
So we will need elementary schools. We will need middle schools. We obviously already need some sort of change in the high school, whether it's
Right.
a new high school or a big addition. And I think we tend to approach things as a town on a very compartmentalized way, right? It's sort of, here's a law. We have to follow this law because they told us to. Right? Here's another thing. Well, we just have to do this. And they never look at it on a big picture and say, is this good for the town? It's, again, I hate to use that term bureaucrat, but I think it fits because a bureaucrat takes procedural correctness over what's good for the people. And I think that's what we have. These folks aren't necessarily against you. It's just more like they're not thinking about every impact to an average citizen, which is what we're trying to do.
Right. And I want to go back to one of the words you just used because I think it's interesting, right? You said good for the town, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's the way that it's viewed, right? The leaders or, the people who are the select board or other members of the town, let's say executive members of the town, view the town as a corporation, right? Because it's what's good for the town is if it's a company, right? So we're looking at P&L, profit loss of a company. But in reality, just what you went back to, the town should be residents. It's like what's good for the residents, right? So when you use the proverbial town designation, it becomes a little bit less personal, but really it should be about what is best for the residents of Shrewsbury, not the town, let's say, as a corporation.
That's true. And I think you see that in a number of meetings that we attended on the planning board recently. There was an issue on the Route 70 warehouses. And they had the gentleman from the organization that wants to build there. We asked many questions. And oftentimes the answer was, well, we're just following what the town told us.
Right.
Right. And the issue is, no. I wanted to get up and I didn't get a chance after I spoke. The town is the people in the room, not the people you're speaking to. The planning board is not the town. They are citizens of the town. They are a small group within the town, and they have a voice. But so do the many people behind you that are actually concerned citizens. And I think that's the thing we have to think about in a town meeting situation and the way our town is set up. We do have to realize that we need to take control as citizens of what happens in town, and not rely on abrogating our responsibilities to folks that are also very busy. Think about the planning board. They're put into those positions. They're unpaid. They have real jobs. They do real things, right? We have to take that into account, but we also have to realize they're just people. And we the people, actually have the bigger voice.
Absolutely. And I think that's where we got to because when we looked at impact and other things like traffic, cost of living, when you look at, maybe our tax rate isn't increasing, but all the appraised values of our homes are increasing rapidly, right? If you look at it, say, over even the past 5 years, dramatic increase there. So our total taxes paid keep going up. And some of the things that we're concerned about, I was concerned about is how do seniors, stay in their homes in Shrewsbury? How do people who don't have the ability or not in the pinnacle of their career afford to stay in the town? Right. So going back to what you just said, one of the things I think that for me, at least, the trigger that said, hey, I think we should do something, at least send a message by running, was when we actually asked for the sample ballot, because we were looking at town meeting members. Right. One of the things, that I started to dig into on town government, to your point, I've always been busy. I've never really dug into how does the town work? What's town meeting all about? What does even a town meeting member do? And these are the things you start looking at and say, that's a really important position in town. And I think a lot of people don't even realize what the purpose is. They see it on a ballot, every year, but I don't know how many people in town either aspire to be a town meeting member or know what they do. So when we looked at that ballot and saw, hey, most of these positions are unopposed, that doesn't give people a lot of choice. And for me, that was, I think, when I said, you know what? We need to be able to at least offer an alternative point of view. Because that's healthy. That's a healthy part of the democratic process, right? Being able to debate. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, 100%. And I think the thing we saw with those unopposed folks was, how do we actually send a message to the folks that seem to be giving us the party line?
Right.
And the party in this case is not a partisan thing. The party line is the town officials as a whole rather than the community, right? And it was the idea that, how do we send a message in a very short period of time without actually knowing that we probably in that short period of time couldn't win any of those positions. But looking back to the history of America, right? It's a shot across the bow.
Right.
We wanted to send a message to the folks at the town, especially the elected officials, that we are here, we are listening, and we are concerned, and we need to make a change.
Right. And I looked at it too, is that a lot of people use the excuse that I don't have time, I have a million other things going on. And we could have fallen into that same trap, but I think I got to the point where I had to say to myself, well, if not us, then whom? Right? So that's why I think we went ahead and did that. And right, and if you look at what we actually did, right, it wasn't about an individual elected official. It wasn't about, to your point, it wasn't a specific person, idea, or anything. It was just, we wanted to send a message that there are people watching, there are people who are engaged in what's going on in town, and people are concerned about the direction of the town and want to get involved. So by doing that, running as essentially a movement or a group of people, we thought it was at least going to be a little bit more of a message, to your point, of maybe they'll actually start to think about, hey, there's other people in town looking at what we're doing. So we did do that. We also ran the 4 main offices. I ran as a moderator, which is an actual important position. I mean, a lot of people, I don't think, even know what the moderator does. They think, oh, he just runs town meeting. Well, yes, but the important part is he actually gets to appoint the finance committee, right? So who's overlooking the financial aspects of the town? Where are our tax dollars spent, or at least overseeing the town manager in a way of saying, is this a fiscal responsible thing to do, which is very important, right? Then you were on the select board position. So you can talk a little bit about your thoughts around select board.
Yeah, I look at the select board as almost like the board of directors of the town, right? And we had some concerns there, again, not as individuals, but really looking at the board response. And initially it was sort of that party line. They did change, and I think a lot of that had to do with the activation of the citizens to really say, hey, wait a minute, let's kind of pause this MBTA Communities Act and push it off at least till the fall. But we still are concerned that, do they understand the real concerns of the average citizen as a group?
Right.
And our feeling is we still need more work there.
Absolutely.
Again, it doesn't mean we want to unseat them. What it means is we need to act as citizens, active citizens, and make our case.
Absolutely.
And make them understand that in that specific role, they are representatives of the people.
Right. And then school committee, the school committee is critical because in every town, right, the vast majority of your budget is spent on schools, right? Huge amount of money. Shrewsbury, over $80 million, right, is spent on schools every year. And it's really important that we actually have there. And if you look at the tenure of a lot of positions, we have a lot of board members who have been in these roles a long time, multiple terms, 3, 4 terms, 16 years, in one position, where they haven't had a lot of turnover. And I think not purposely do you get stuck in kind of a mode of, let's say, go along to get along, but it becomes very repetitive and kind of becomes a little bit more measured as far as what your participation is. And, of course, if you're talking to the same people over and over again, most people want to have a good relationship, right? You don't want to go into a contentious meeting every month, right? You want to actually get along with, say, your coworkers. So you kind of understand how you can get in those patterns. And I think you just, at some point in time, you need to mix things up and get a little fresh ideas, a different way of thinking. Because if you've been in there for, let's say, 16 years, you're starting to really think like, let's say, the superintendent thinks. You really almost need a different perspective on that, right? Versus just that same old status quo.
Yeah, and local elections and appointments are where democracy happens the best, right? If you do a poll of average Americans, I think Congress has the least likelihood of love out of any group polled, right? Everybody hates them. At a local level, we tend to know these folks a little bit more. Some of us know them, some of us don't, but more people know them than not. We have access to them, right? And so I think that sort of closer to direct democracy argument is we should have that turnover more frequently because you need that difference of opinion. We don't actually want the same thoughts, to your point, right? I don't want a select board that actually comes out and does a sort of canned speech out of each person, but it all sounds exactly the same, right? Because they talked earlier on.
Right.
I actually want that give and take. I want a little contention. I want some constructive criticism.
Right.
And I don't think we have enough of that in any of our boards and our elected positions in town.
Yeah, and I think one example, quick, on that select board piece is I agree with you on the preparedness, right? I think we want to see that debate because if you go back and look at even the intent on the high school, now the vote was 3-2, and one would say, ooh, that was close because there was actually some dissent. But when you really look at how it is, you only need a majority. So I'm pretty sure up front that they already knew that that's the way it was going to go, but they felt like, you know what, I think we should probably let people know that we're not all behind this thing. So we're going to do that, right? We're going to actually have 2 dissenting voices. It'll still go through, but at least we can articulate that we are thinking about both sides. But the way it's presented, in my opinion, right, is so prepared. They have iPads, they have prepared statements, they're reading scripts. They're not doing this kind of dialogue where we're just off the cuff having a conversation, right, about here's how I believe. What do you think? It's let me go back to the iPad, let me read and make sure it comes out proper because if I miss a word, I don't want to be criticized, right? And I'm not really blaming an individual on that, but that's just my view on how I would like to see things. Other people may say, no, I like that prim and proper method, which is fine. But in my opinion, I'd like to see a little bit more humanity, let's say, behind
You want
behind some of the
respectful,
speeches.
vociferous
Right.
debate,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
I still want people to actually show some humanity, and to your point, advocate.
Right.
Advocate for a side that you really believe in.
Yeah. Now, let's get back to the actual election day
Sure.
of the actual campaign. There's a few other things I wanted to kind of go over. Just a note for anybody out there who wants to run a write-in campaign. Number one, in Massachusetts, you are allowed to run what they call a sticker campaign, right? Which means you can print stickers and you can put the stickers on your ballot. You can find this. There's a nice guide to write-in campaign right on the Secretary of State's website. And it does allow you to do this, right? And that's what we chose to do because we had 4 candidates running plus town meeting member seats, and we didn't want people to have to write in names and addresses of possibly 5 or 6 people, in the voting booth. So we thought it'd be easier to provide stickers. Now, interesting thing was, you were out of town, right? So you didn't even get to deal with this, but I got a nice text right about 10:30 in the morning saying, panic, they're not letting us use stickers. And I said, what? So essentially what happened was they were being told that they didn't want us to use stickers or we couldn't use stickers. So I had to beeline down to the clerk's office.
At the precinct level.
At the precinct level, right. So at the precinct level. So I beelined down to the clerk's office and with the ballot in hand of what we did and had a conversation. And I said, hey, I'm concerned because I'm being told people aren't allowed to use the stickers. And they said, well, usually people tell us when they're doing this, right? Now, I will say, it says it is recommended, right? It says it is recommended you contact the clerk. It doesn't say you have to. It doesn't say must. It doesn't even say shall. It says recommended. And there was a reason why we didn't, right? Because we were concerned if it had gotten out. The whole point of this was it was going to be a secret and it wasn't going to be something that was a shot across the bow, right? It was not even aware that it was going on. And all of a sudden it was like, whoo, what happened, right? Fair?
With these people.
Right. So we were doing it in that manner on purpose. We didn't do any advertising, 0 Facebook posts. I mean, this was legitimately like you went back and talked about the founding fathers where it was like, I rode my horse to my neighbor to say, hey, by the way, we got this thing we got to go do. Get on your horse and we're driving down to Philadelphia. Yeah. Right. So that's what we were doing, person to person, having conversations, meeting our neighbors, which I think is really lost today. I don't know your take on that, but I just wish people would get out and talk to people more face to face.
Yeah, I think this is the thing that we learned from this, right? Just I went out and spoke to a number of people. I did vote and I did absentee ballot because I was out, but and I did use the stickers. But I think face to face, we've lost that capacity, and we shouldn't, right? In this process where we've done these public meetings, both that the town has put on and that we've put on, it's been phenomenal because people really do kind of interact with you. And so doing that and also keeping it to the more or less friends and family, just to prove a point, just to say, hey, we're out here without all of that extra advertising. I think we did it in what, 4 or 5 days?
5 days.
5 days. And we did see good results from that. But more importantly, I think it was just an interesting exercise again in direct democracy.
Right.
Like talk to your neighbors, get out there, actually knock on a door.
Well, think about it. 300 votes in 5 days when every single person had to purposefully walk down to the voting place with a sticker, put it on a ballot, or write a name in. They couldn't just show up and fill a bubble, right? And that's pretty impressive considering it's over 10% of the vote, right? We got over 10% of the vote with 5 days of work. It was a lot of work, don't get me wrong, but it really shows you that it resonated what we were talking about with people, right? Because if it hadn't, nobody would have done it.
Yep.
I mean, I remember I had a conversation with a neighbor who essentially says, I used to vote. And actually he said, when I was in India, I used to vote, but I used to vote NOTA, right? Which is a slot, which is none of the above. It's almost like it's definitely just there's nobody worth voting for, but at least they allow you to say, I'd rather vote for nobody than somebody on this ballot, right? And after a conversation with him about kind of our rationale, he actually said, you've convinced me. Give me 2 ballots. My wife and I are going to go vote. And to me, that's powerful, right? To be able to have those kind of conversations and get people back as part of the process that we're trying to get people engaged with, which is great. I do want to move on to the afternoon here, right?
All right.
Because after we resolved the issue with the clerk, and I will say she was very good. She did reach out to all the precincts by phone and let them know that they should be allowing it. Apparently, we've got new voting machines in town, and one of their concerns was the stickers would get jammed up in the machine, and they didn't know if that was going to wreck the machine or cause problems. So that was really more the concern. It wasn't that we couldn't use the stickers. They were just concerned if we used them, there was going to cause issues. So fortunately, we did use them. We went right through to your point. My wife and I voted with the stickers, no issues. Most people voted with the stickers, no problems. However, in the afternoon, I will say the powers that be did find out, right? And actually sent out an email, which we're going to go to now. So Beth Cassavant, who is the chair of the select board, right? She's the chair of the select committee, did send a note out letting people know that there was a write-in campaign underway and that all 4 major offices, right, were now contested and critical, in bold, it was critical that everybody go out and vote for the incumbents. So, a lot of times in the conversations we hear in these board meetings that we've been to, they really tout a lot about community engagement. Hey, we've really got out. We want to get people involved with the community. We really want to make sure their voices are heard. But it's interesting when people in the community use that voice, right, in a process which you think they would encourage, as far as, hey, I'm really glad to see other people are getting involved with, the local politics. But that's not really how it went over, I think, with the incumbents.
Yeah, I think it was one of those things where it's sort of like, are we that afraid of a group of people with stickers, right, that weren't around with stickers 5 days ago? So I think it smacked to me of a little bit of desperation and fear, but it also brings up the fact that, is this just a crowd that protects itself?
Right.
I agree. It should have been more, maybe not say anything and just let it ride, right? This is the process, right?
Right.
Or present, why do you think these particular folks should be reelected?
Right.
They had no chance to do that because they were unopposed. So to me, yeah, look, I get it. On the same token, it kind of made me laugh.
Right. But that wasn't it. There was one more. And this one came remotely, right?
Yeah.
I think this was sent from Arizona.
Arizona Mo.
Arizona Mo.
Our head of the planning board, I believe.
Yes.
Also sent a very critical email to folks. A lot of capitalization,
There's colors too.
a lot of color in there, and just dedicated public servants, dedicated
Inexperience.
yeah, and experienced. And again, that goes back to experienced at what and dedicated to what. Because I think if you look at what we've been witnessing, we're seeing a lot of experienced at not necessarily explaining things to the public clearly, and maybe dedicated to the status quo.
Agreed. 100% dedicated to the status quo and what they're comfortable with. And I think that's part of it. They're comfortable with those around them. They're members of the board. And I think there is a fear of, if there is somebody with a different point of view, what will that look like? What will that feel like? Right? Or the other piece is, what if I'm not in this position, right? Where this position now is becoming more of their identity versus a role as a servant. If you're a true public servant, it should be about what the people want, right? And am I serving them? It's not about serving myself, not about having a business card that says select board member. It's about, am I doing right by my community, right? So wrapping up the election piece, one thing that was very hard, I think, for us that I didn't really 100% take into consideration is mail-in balloting in Massachusetts, right? You're allowed to fill out at the beginning of a year. You check the box on your postcard, you send it back, you get all your ballots, which includes town elections. So I believe, about 2/3 of the vote is from mail-in for the town election. Day of voting was very, very low. I mean, the total turnout was about 10%. It was over 2,000 votes, but that's about 10% of registered voters. A lot of those came in through mail-in ballot ahead of time, which we had no chance of winning, right? But one thing, I think we've talked about is that our promise to Shrewsbury, right, as the Unselects / those who are willing to sign up for it, is that there will no longer be any unopposed elections moving forward in Shrewsbury, right? People should have a choice of who they elect, should have a choice of their leaders. And that is my commitment. I think it's your commitment and the commitment of others in our group, that this isn't going to happen again. There will always be choice, and there will always be somebody running for these positions.
Yeah, I think, think about it this way. You're a busy person. You got kids in the school. You got to go to work. You got a lot going on, but participate. It's a participatory process. That's what America is. And we need to get back to that. And we start at the local level. And so if you're interested, if you see something, reach out to us. We're here to find the right people, and we just want that debate, and we want the ability for people to, go after some positions they might be interested in.
Yeah, so the Unselects this is the first of many shows. We plan on this being a reoccurring show. So I thank everybody for tuning in today for our first episode. We are able to be contacted. We welcome people who are interested. If you have a topic for the show, if you think you would be a good guest on the show, you can email us at contact@theunselects.com, and we will get back to you and have a dialogue. So I appreciate everybody from tuning in. And once again, I'm Gregg Richards.
I'm Brian Costello.
And we are the Unselects.